Thank you, Mary, so much. The text for the message today is a very well-known passage of Scripture, the great love chapter from 1 Corinthians 13. We're going to read just a portion of the passage this morning, 1 Corinthians 13. We're going to read verses 4 through the first part of verse 8. The title of the message today is What Children Need from Their Mothers. 1 Corinthians 13, we're going to read verses 4 through 8a. Paul writes, love is patient and kind. The King James there has that translated, love is long-suffering and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, or love never ends, as my translation has it. This chapter, the greatest words ever written on the subject of love, was not written specifically with mothers in mind. But interestingly, quite a bit of what children need from their moms is to be found in these verses we just read. In fact, I found 6 things that I want to share with you this morning that children need from their moms that come straight from this passage of Scripture we just read. The first thing is patience. In verse 4, children need patience from their mothers. Paul writes, love is patient. Now I mentioned that the King James translation there is love is long-suffering, and I actually prefer that translation. Love is patient, but it's more than that. It is long-suffering. And you know what? Genuine love, when it is expressed toward another person, includes suffering. Have you ever thought about that? And parenting involves suffering. It's not just that love is patient with another person, but that love is willing to endure suffering because of another person. Look, let's be honest. Those of you who are parents know this. Kids can try your patience. It's not easy being a parent, and there's a lot of suffering that is involved in being a parent. And when you are a mother, you are willing to do that. And Paul is saying that when Christ-like love is expressed in the home, it is willing to endure suffering and to keep on loving. And so there's the first thing. Love is patient. Children need patience from their mother. The second thing they need is also in verse 4, and that's kindness. Paul says love is kind. And I think there are 2 ways that mothers express kindness to their children. One is encouragement, and the other is affection. Children need encouragement, just generally speaking, and they especially need it from their mothers, or mothers are certainly more apt to give it. I think that verbal kind of encouragement, and it is so important in a child's development. The great painter Pablo Picasso once said that when I was a child, my mother said to me, if you become a soldier, you will become a general. And if you become a priest, you will be the Pope. And he said, and so I became a painter, and I became Picasso. See, he understood the role that his mother played in his development by encouraging him when he was a child. But affection is also part of this kindness that mothers express in the home. A mother who is cold and silent and uncommunicative, it's unnatural. A lot of men are that way, but it's unnatural for a mother to be that way. And mothers need to express openly affection to children. Lots of hugs and kisses and I love yous and all of that. I was reading Toni Morrison. I don't know if you know who she is or not. She's an author. She wrote the book Beloved and a lot of others. Anyway, she was talking, she's a mom, and she said this. She said, grown doesn't mean anything to a mother. She said, a child is a child. They get bigger and they get older, but grown? I don't even know what that means. And she said, in my heart, it doesn't mean a thing. And what she was saying, of course, is that a mother is always going to have that mother's heart toward her kids. And this Mary's like that with our three. They're all grown now. Two of them are married. All three of them are living, in their own homes and have been for a while. And it's just different to watch in our home the difference of how a mom relates to them and how a father relates to them. And by the way, and it's not that neither one is bad and the other isn't. It's just different. It's that God-given, a God-ordained way that God made us. And kids need that from their moms. They need that type of affection that is lifelong. And so that's the second thing. Love. Kids need patience from their moms. They need kindness from their moms. The third thing is found in verse 5. Paul says, love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. And you know what I think Paul is talking about there? I think he's talking about example. That children need a good example from their mothers. Mary and I were out walking the other day. There, where we live in Whittier, there's a nature trail, or I guess a walking trail, they call it. It's quite long, and we've been walking that lately in the afternoons. And as we were walking along, we were going in this direction, and these two women were coming, in this direction. And they were talking to one another, and we overheard the conversation. And one of the women talking to the other, she was cursing like a sailor. And you sailors who are here, I don't mean to embarrass you by that, but you know what I mean. That saying, cursing like a sailor. You should have heard this woman. All the really bad words you're not supposed to say, that's what she was saying. Two women talking to each other that way. I hate language like that, and I especially hate to hear it coming from women, because one of the things that women have done traditionally over the generations is they've at least kept some of the civility. They've been the guardians of civility in our society. And once women let go of that, it's gone. It's over. Mothers have an unequaled opportunity in the home to be an example for their children and the way children should behave, the way they should talk, and so on. An unequaled example to influence their children. I was reading recently about John Wesley, who was the founder of the Methodist Church. And this writer who had written a biography of John Wesley said something I was not aware of, but he said that there's no way to understand John Wesley and the Methodist Church without understanding or knowing something about John Wesley's mother, Susanna Wesley. He said, if you want to know John Wesley, study his mother. You want to know something about the mother of the Methodist Church? Don't study John Wesley, study his mother, Susanna. And his point is well made. There's not a person in this sanctuary today who was not heavily influenced, for good or for bad, by their mothers. To the point that I would say, you take any person in the world, you want to really know that person, what makes them behave the way they do, act the way they do, think the way they do, talk the way they do, look at their mothers. For good or for bad. You want to know what motivates a person? Look at their moms. Moms, you have an unrivaled opportunity to be an example and an influence over your children. And so show your children in the home how a Christian behaves. Show them how a Christian woman behaves. So that's the third thing, example. Children need a good example from their mothers and grandmothers. The fourth thing is also in verse 5. Paul writes, love does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. What's he talking about there? He's talking about sacrifice, right? Paul is saying that children need their mothers to sacrifice on their behalf. I don't know if any of you have seen this video that's making the rounds on the internet. It's set up as a company looking to hire a new employee, and they've entitled the position that they're looking to fill is called Director of Operations. Now, in fact, there is no job, but a number of people come in for this interview, both men and women. They're interviewing for this position, and And the person doing the video, he starts telling them what's involved in this job they're looking to fill. It's 135 hours a week. There's no pay. There are no breaks. The job must be done mostly standing up or bending over. You can eat lunch, but only after what they call your associate has eaten his lunch. You must have good interpersonal skills. Medical ability is a plus. The ability to work in chaotic situations. And there are no holidays and no vacations. And of course, every single person they interview says, "You're crazy." Nobody will ever take that job, especially to do it for free. And then at the end they say to them, well, there are actually billions of people in the world who already have this job. And they say, well, who? And they say, moms. And of course they all get it then. But that's absolutely right, isn't it? The essence, if I picked one word beyond maybe love that really embodies what it means to be a mom, sacrifice would be the word. This past weekend was the NFL draft, and all the NFL teams were picking their players, and the New Orleans Saints, our team, picked their guy in the first round, and he was talking about how he got there, how he got to the place where he's now a first-round draft pick in the NFL. And this kid said that his dad died some years back while he was just a teenager. And so the mom, to make ends meet, started working 2 jobs to raise that child, to get him to where he could go to school and eventually provide for himself. And I loved it that the first thing this young man did with the money he got was buy his mom a new car. But his story and his mother's story is probably not that unusual. It's just getting some media attention. The fact of the matter is that moms all across America do that on a daily basis. Do whatever it takes, whether it's working 2 jobs or staying up all night, or whatever it takes, to raise that child and get them safely to adulthood. Moms do that on a regular basis. I remember when our kids were young, and in church, they got to the point where I don't remember now which child it was, if it was more than one of them or just one of them, but at least one of them was starting to misbehave a little bit in church, Now, I couldn't be there with them because I'm up here. And this church where we were, it had a big choir, and if you know anything about Mary, you know how much she loves to sing, how much she loves to be in a choir. But when it got to the point where the kids weren't behaving, she just didn't sing in the choir anymore. And she sat on the pew with them during the service to help them learn how to behave in church. That's something moms do all the time. That's normal behavior for mothers, and that's a blessed thing. And so the fourth thing there is children need that sacrificial attitude on behalf of their moms, the willingness to give up your own interests, your own desires, your own life even, if necessary, for your children. The fifth thing, it's in verse 6, love does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices with the truth. And I thought there Paul is talking about guidance. And in particular, 2 things. Love does not rejoice at wrongs, that's discipline. But rejoices with the truth, that's instruction. And kids need both from their mothers. They need discipline and they need instruction. Let's take instruction first. The sculptor Da Vinci was once asked why he spent so much time with the small details of his sculptures, not just the big things that everybody sees, but he was asked this by a friend who was sitting there watching him very finely work on the little hairs on the back of the head of a statue, and his friend commented to him that most people are never even going to see the sculpted hair on the back of the statue's head. And he had spent like a month working on that. And he said, why do you spend so much time on those little details that nobody's ever going to see? To which Da Vinci said, I'm working for the future. I'm sculpting for eternity. He realized that he was working on something that was going to endure for time. Now that's what mothering is like, isn't it? You are working on something there in the home. You are laboring for tomorrow, not just for today. And that time you spend teaching a child, instructing a child, you're building something for the future there, for eternity. You never know when the instruction you're giving that child, you never know when it's going to kick in, and suddenly the light comes on. You may have to tell a child something 10,000 times before they get it. And it's so easy as a parent to just get frustrated, to give up, to just stop trying, but you can't do that. You have to keep on, keep on, keep on, and if the child doesn't get it the first time, say it again. If they don't get it the second time, say it again. And the third, and the fourth, and the 100th, and the 1000th, and you keep on saying it, and you keep on teaching right from wrong, and one day it's going to click in. Some kids just take more time than others, and so you just keep doing it. That's instruction. But the other thing is discipline. When Paul says love does not rejoice at wrongs, I think that's at least part of what he has in mind there. Let me ask you a question. When did parents lose control of their homes? I know it has happened in America. I don't know exactly when, but it has happened. There was an article, I saw this on the internet, it's from Red Book magazine. It teaches parents how to say no without saying no. As if saying no is such a horrible thing, Another article, this was written by a child psychologist who describes herself as being an expert on child rearing. She wrote an article entitled, 18 Ways to Say No Positively. And she went on to add, we feel upset and sad when we see their big eyes filled with tears and their tiny faces scrunched with anger when we refuse them something they want. I don't feel bad. I don't. Not at all. Not even a little bit. I'm old school when it comes to parenting. I think parents ought to run the home, not kids. I think parents ought to run the show, not kids. One of my favorite stories is from a guy, this man was in the first church I ever served as pastor. I was still a seminary student and pastoring this church. And this guy, I was about to call him an old guy until I realized now he was probably about a year younger than I am right now. But he seemed ancient to me at the time. He grew up on a farm. And he told me, and like all farm kids, he had to get up 4 o'clock in the morning and milk the cows and do all the other things that kids do on farms. And that was before he would go to school. He had to get up at 4 to do all that stuff. And he said when he got to be a teenager, some of his other friends, they got to go out late at night, go to parties and stay out and come in whenever they wanted to. And he decided that he wanted to do that. And so he went out to some party one night and got home, I think it was about, he said, 2 o'clock in the morning. And he did it sort of as an act of defiance, just to show his mom he could stay out as late as he wanted. And when he got home, his mother was waiting for him. But she wasn't angry like he thought she was going to be. And instead she said to him, you can stay out as late as you want. Your friends are out staying at some party and you want to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's fine. But you're still going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and milk the cows before you go to school. And he said that's the last time he ever stayed out late. Now that's an example of a parent running the show. My parenting motto when our kids were little, and this is no joke, I said this to myself all the time, I repeated it, and I'm now sharing it with my daughter who's raising a young child. Never give up and never give in. And I really tried to follow those two things. Sometimes I felt like I may be locked in mortal combat with these kids, but I'm going to win. I am not giving up and I am not giving in. I'm going to raise 3 children who are honest and hardworking and respectful and are good citizens and good adults. And you know what? We did that. All 3 of them are like that now. Never give up, never give in. Parents, learn how to say no. It's a good word and it's a simple word to say, only 1 syllable. Learn how to say no. Kids need discipline. They need boundaries. They need limits. They need to know that there are rules in life that everyone is supposed to follow. They need parents who will be their parents and not their friends. They've already got friends. And I'm talking about when they're young. Your relationship kind of transitions when your kids become adults. But when they're children, they need parents, not friends. And we do kids a disservice when we give them everything they ask for. We do them a disservice when we fail to teach them the value of things. We do them a disservice when we fail to teach them that hard work is required to have things. There are so, we've got this phenomenon in America today of kids who won't grow up. They're old enough to be adults, but they're still little children. They're still adolescents. There are kids today who have the best cars, they've got expensive clothes, the latest gadgets, and not one of the things they possessed was acquired through their own hard work. Everything they have was given to them by a parent. And so the kid has no clue about what's really required in life to succeed or how things are acquired. And so moms and dads, that's where you come in. It's your job to guide them in life. And so the fifth thing, kids need guidance from their moms, which comes in the form of instruction and discipline. And then the last thing is in verse 7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Paul's talking about acceptance there. Children need acceptance from their mothers. There's an adorable video on the internet right now of a cat who adopted some little newborn ducklings. Have you seen it? It's through kind of a fluke of nature. Normally a cat would eat these ducklings. But the mother cat, this was on a farm, she had just given birth. And within 2 or 3 hours of giving birth to a litter of kittens, these little ducklings were hatched there on the farm. And they wandered into the barn where the mother cat was. And you know what the mother cat did? She pulled them all over there in the nest. And in the video, you see these 3 little kittens and then 3 little ducklings. They're all lying down on their sides. And the ducklings are actually nursing from this mother cat. And the mother cat's got her paws draped over the ducklings and pulling them in. Her mothering hormones had kicked in, and the ducklings came at just the right time while those hormones were flowing through her body there. But there's something precious about that, because obviously ducklings don't belong with a mother cat, but the mother cat took them in and mothered them. And I was thinking about that when I saw that video, and I realized how often kids don't end up being what we thought they were going to be. They don't turn out the way we thought they were going to turn out. And you know what a mother will do? She'll accept them anyway. She'll love them anyway. This is one of the ways that men and women are so different. And by the way, on Father's Day, I'm doing the companion sermon to this sermon, and the title of that message will be Things Children Need from Their Fathers. One of the ways men and women are different is on this very point about how mothers will accept that wayward child when quite often the father won't. I've seen interviews on the news. There'll be some guy, he's a convicted murderer. He's been arrested and tried for killing people. And there's no doubt about his guilt. And they'll talk to the mom, and the mom will say, "Oh, he's a wonderful boy. I just love him. He's such a wonderful boy. There's no way he could have done all that." Now they'll interview the dad if he's still in the picture, and the dad will say something like, "Oh yeah, he did it. He did it. He needs to pay for his crimes. He's been convicted. He needs to pay for what he did." Now, I'm not saying that one is wrong, the other's right, one's better than the other. Again, this is just the difference in the way we are by God's creation. But mothers just have that capacity to accept even the wayward child, even the child who's not what they're supposed to be. And kids need that. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And I've heard people quote that verse as though it's some type of a mathematical formula, that if a kid grows up in a good home, he's going to be a good person as an adult. And if a kid grows up as a bad home, he's going to be a bad person as an adult. And let me tell you, that is not always true. Proverbs 22:6 is a proverb. That means to say it is a generalized truth. It is a wisdom saying. And if you don't believe me, you have to look no further than the Bible. The Bible is filled with examples of people who came from good homes and they were horrible. Hezekiah, for example, was one of the greatest kings in Israel's history, a godly man. But he gave birth, or he didn't give birth, but one of his sons was Manasseh. And Manasseh was a wicked, wicked man. It was because of Manasseh's wickedness that God's destruction came upon Judah. And the converse is true. Sometimes a horrible person will have a good child. Amon was father to Josiah, and Amon was a wicked king, but Josiah was a godly man who walked with God up until the time of his birth. How do you explain that? And I've seen, not just in biblical times, I've seen it in my lifetime. I've seen wonderful Christian homes, and every now and then a kid will come from that home and they reflect nothing of the upbringing they received, nothing of the godliness of their parents. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen godly kids come out of homes that were depraved. You can't believe the kid even escaped alive, and they come out and they grow up to be godly people. It's hard to explain, but it happens. And mothers who have a kid who's maybe wayward and they didn't turn out the way you thought they were going to, or the way you hoped, keep loving that child. Keep praying for that child. Keep loving them with the love of God. And when necessary, give them the forgiveness that they need, just as God forgave us. Now, we ended our text with the first part of verse A, love never fails. And let me tell you why I included that in our reading today. That verse doesn't mean that a mother's love never fails. It means that God's love never fails. It doesn't mean that mothers are perfect. They're not. But God is perfect. And ultimately, the love that forms the foundation of a Christian home is not a mother's love, as important as that is. It's not a father's love, as important as that is. The love of God is the foundation of a home. And so moms, whatever your circumstances, whatever is going on in your home, do the best that you can under God and leave the results in His hands. Outside of Hodgenville, Kentucky, there's a little log cabin. A baby was born in that cabin to a man named Tom and his devout Christian wife, Nancy Hanks. Now, when they married, Nancy Hanks took her husband Tom's last name, and Tom and Nancy Lincoln welcomed that child into their home in 1809. They named the boy Abraham. They lived there in Hodgenville, Kentucky, on what was then the edge of the American frontier. Lived in a little log cabin that Tom had built with his own hands. And their son Abraham, when he was just a boy under the tutelage of his godly mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was taught the great moral and spiritual truths of Christianity from the Bible. Now, she was not what we would call an educated woman at all. But under her faithful tutelage, as she taught him the Word of God, he learned. And though they lived in abject poverty, Lincoln, as an adult, would say, "No man is poor who has a godly mother." In October of 1818, Nancy Lincoln contracted what people called back then milk sickness. It was from drinking the milk of a cow that had eaten the poisonous, highly poisonous white snake root plant. And she died from that illness. She was 34 years old. Her son, Abraham, was 9. That 9-year-old boy went out on the property with his dad, and they cut down a pine tree and built her coffin from that pine tree, that rough, unsmooth timber from their own property, and buried her there on that property, 9 years old. On the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., there is on the back of the memorial an inscription. It reads, "Here in this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom He saved the Union, is described forever the memory of Abraham Lincoln. And I read those words this week, that plaque, and I thought back to that little log cabin and an untutored, uneducated woman, day by day, taking the Bible and teaching it to her son. And I remembered what Lincoln said of her as an adult when he said, "All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to my angel mother." Who would have guessed that? Who would have guessed that from the hands of that pioneer mother teaching her son the truth of God's Word when he was just a boy would one day rise one of the greatest men who ever lived? We never know what God will accomplish through our efforts as parents until the entire story is written. I do know there is no way to overestimate the importance of a mother to her family and to the world. And I believe without question that a godly mother can literally change the world. Moms, grandmoms, what do your kids need from you today? From our text, they need patience, they need kindness, they need example, they need sacrifice, they need guidance, and they need acceptance. All of those are expressions of love. And remember, you may fail, but God never does. Lay that as the foundation of your home. This morning we're going to sing, as our song of invitation, hymn number 330.